Welcome to part 2 of working with Studio One's Presence XT. And when we left off in part 1, we were working with the amp envelope. So let's go ahead and dive in and take a look at envelope 2. Now we've got the same parameters below. We've got attack, decay, sustain, release. And we also have an addition of a decay dial here, which we can use to control when the ADSR is going to take effect of whatever we've chosen to have it control. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, and while we're doing that, we're also going to cover the modulation matrix here. So what I will do is I'm going to take the envelope 2 and I want to apply that to the filter cutoff. So now our filter cutoff here is going to be affected by envelope 2, and whatever adjustments we make to the envelope is going to control the cutoff here. Now, in order to, in this kind of default setting, there's not going to be any effect because we're dead center here. We need to move left or right. Now, this is going to adjust the polarity. So if we're working with a filter cutoff and I raise this to the right, we're going to introduce higher frequencies. If I move to the left, then we're going to cut frequencies. So you can think of the left as being negative and going to the right is going to be a positive polarity. Now let's talk about this decay here, the first dial. So I will let's cut frequencies, and I'm going to raise the cutoff. So, and then I will set the delay. We can see as we raise this, we have a readout of how many milliseconds we're delaying. I'm going to take this up pretty high to, say, 1.5 seconds, and we can take that all the way up to 2 seconds. I'll come back down to about 1.5. So with these settings then, when I press the key, we should have our initial filter cutoff here at about 5 kilohertz. And then after about 1.5 seconds, we should cut what we've set here. So I hope this makes sense. When I press a key here, hopefully if you're not understanding what's going on, it will make more sense. Okay, so you can see for that first 1.5 seconds, we had our cutoff as we set here. So whatever we have going on here is going to be played first. And this is what we use this envelope 2 for then. We can assign it to different parameters and then have it take effect at different times throughout this timeline as our original sample is playing back. So if I take this delay back to, say, 1 second, you can see it cuts it sooner. We can adjust the sustain. You can see it kind of takes out the effect. And we can use our attack, and I'm going to shorten that delay so we can hear how the attack is going to bring the filter in a bit slower. And again, we can adjust here, that bend. Now alternatively, we can set our cutoff low here and then change our polarity to have the higher frequencies come in. So now we should start off where our frequencies are going to be in the lower range, and then we gradually introduce the higher ones. Raise our decay. Let's take that up so we can hear a bit of that initial signal. Okay, so that's how you can take advantage of the envelope 2 here and just assign it to, you've got all these different options that you can use the envelope with. Now, while we're working with the modulation matrix, why do we have 2 different selections here? Well, we can actually use this to say if I want to have the mod wheel affect the LFO1, which is here, and then I want LFO1 to affect the pitch. So now if I press a key on the keyboard, the LFO, it's not doing anything right now really. We can see our display, our indicator. If I raise this up, you can see now we're introducing some modulation to the pitch, but it's not going to be active when I press a key because we've chosen to have the mod wheel control the LFO. Then the LFO is going to control the pitch. So I'll go ahead and trigger some keys, and then I will move the mod wheel on my MIDI controller, and then you'll see how the LFO modulation will then be introduced to the pitch of our sound. So if you pay attention to the mod dial here, you'll see. Okay, and then as we already covered in part 1, we can adjust the rates here. And you can choose between sine and these other square. Okay, and now if I take the mod wheel control off, now as soon as since we don't have another anything here in this top selection, then as soon as I press a key, the LFO here is going to trigger or modulate our sound. Okay, and so you've got 2 different banks here, 2 banks of 8. So you got mod A, mod B. If at any time we want to disengage this and not have it active, we can just click above, and that will activate and deactivate our settings. Now I'll go ahead and control click to return this back. And then let's move on to our effects section here. We'll start with bank A, effects A, and effects B we have. And first we have modulation. We can click to make it active by clicking on the name for any one of these. And there's a total of 7 different effects that we have to choose from. Now with the modulation, this creates time-based modulation effects, and you can choose between 3 different modulation modes. We have chorus, flanger, and phaser here. So with the chorus, one of our first options that we have or settings below here is mono, and with this you can choose mono to make the wet signal mono. And actually maybe I'll choose a different sound here. So you can hear how that adjusts the wet signal there. And next we have a delay here, and this will kind of make your sounds a bit fuller and thicker when you move to the right. So if I'm going to take this down to the left, and you can hear the difference here. And then back to the right. You got speed of the modulation, width, feedback, and we can sync this to in relation to our song tempo. And the depth here is kind of like a wet-dry setting. So all the way to the left, we're going to have our dry signal. The more we move to the right, we're going to introduce more of this flanger modulation that we're using. So this is just our dry signal. Okay, and then next we have phaser. We also have mono mode there as well. Shift, sync, and feedback. And of course the depth. We get more of that wet signal as soon as we go to the right. Okay, so that's modulation. Next we have delay. And I think I will change this up again, and just to make this as obvious, of course we all know what delay is, but now the low and high are basically going to kind of adjust the cutoff for what frequencies are going to get the delay applied to it. So we can introduce more of the lower frequencies into the delay. And we have off here. If we click on this, we have a drop-down menu where we can choose the panning effects. So by default, we're going to get a stereo pan both left and right, but we can choose pan, and it's going to pan back and forth. We've got dotted and double. Of course, we've got delay time, feedback, and then our mix. And then our reverb here basically allows us to send this delayed signal over to the reverb. This does need to be turned on, so if I come back, let's take some of the feedback off. Now I can click on the reverb here and then make use of this that we've just activated. If I turn the mix up, we can hear that very clearly. Now if I turn this off, you see we're not getting that reverb anymore. So you do need to have this engaged and the reverb turned on. And actually it does seem like there's still some getting in here, so Now I'll turn off the delay. And of course reverb, we've got pre-delay here. Damp. It's going to basically control the high frequencies of our reverb, the sound that's wet. Size. Again, low and high for frequency attenuation of what's being processed. And then our mix. Let's move on to the second bank, that's effects B. And first we have a gator. And again, I'll get a new sound going on here. We'll just come back to our analog fifths. So if we go ahead and activate this, it's on clear by default, but we can choose from a handful of default settings. So if I choose this trance here, we can do a couple other of these. Okay, then we've got time. Now, as far as the time is concerned, if I were to set this to 1 bar, then essentially this pass-through is going to take 1 bar. Okay, and so if I were to, as I lower this, then it's just going to speed it up within that 1 bar, of course, in relation to our song tempo. Now, of course, we can also come in and manually click and choose our own gate settings. We also have a stereo mode, and with this, if we click that, you see we get this little line here, and we can kind of have our gate panned. So now, you see we now have some panning in our, and then we've got depth. All the way back to the left is our dry signal. Alright, that's the gator. Next we have EQ, and this is just for modifying our frequencies, of course. Now, you may initially think that these are default settings, or if you click one, then it's going to adjust the diagram here. What it really does is it kind of changes the frequencies that these adjust themselves. So based on whatever sound you're working with, then depending on which of these you click, your settings here will affect the sound a bit differently. Alright, we'll go ahead and turn that off. Next we have distortion. I won't spend too much time with this because basically you would want to come in and try all of these out and hear for yourself what they sound like to get the sound that you would like to have. And then we've got panning here. And of course time. Depth. And our sync. Okay, and that covers the rest of Presence XT. I should be getting Studio One Professional pretty soon and getting the editor for Presence XT. So I plan on making some videos on using the editor and bringing our own samples in, setting those up, and going a bit further with this sample player. So hope you got something useful from this. Thanks for watching.